All right, welcome to Real Marketing Talk. We're here with Jaimie Vennell. This is Intentionally. I'm Jess Flynn, and today we're going to talk about demand gen and media planning because that seems to be the item of discussion these days. So, Jaimie, I would love to know when you talk to clients about their media plan, where do you start? Like, what's ground zero?
Sure. Great question. And it's a popular question because it is, there's always an appetite for paid media advertising driving results. So, in the grand scheme of planning, paid media is one component of so many different tools and tactics you can use. And what we love about paid media is we can turn it on and off, and we can control results, specific results like impressions and clicks. It's almost like a faucet that you can turn on and off. So it's very tangible. And I think that where we like to start is thinking about how each account, how they perceive paid media and how they understand it, and just making sure that there is a foundation of basic understanding of how it functions and what's needed to get it off the ground. And then ultimately, if we do come to a place where there is an appetite and there's potentially budget to support paid media, we start talking about foundational questions like business goals and reach, target audience, and it becomes very strategic very quickly. But what we do find is that the most common roadblock that accounts tend to run into is the budget needed to fund paid media. That is typically the first hurdle that we need to discuss, because without budget, we can't run a paid media plan, right? So budget is required, and typically we like to have some estimate of what we may be able to work with in order to have a strategic planning conversation.
Yeah, so, I think paid media in general is such a broad statement. When you think of paid media, what are the things that cross your mind as sort of the most important aspects to consider for firms that are either an RIA or a fintech in the wealth management space?
Sure. I think we ultimately would like to understand what results and output and results are we looking for, right? So there's so many different goals we can achieve. We can focus on brand awareness, simply reaching as many folks in our target audience as possible to increase brand awareness, or we can focus on demand generation and lead generation, driving that immediate lead capture. And then there are other objectives that we can achieve, like increasing social followers. Going viral is one that's a little less tangible, but sometimes is an option.
Well, and that's where like the goal, right, precedes the strategy, because ultimately we have these conversations all day long. I want to see leads coming into the pipeline, but then at the end of the day, what they're aiming for is potentially followers, because they're going to go to market with something soon and they want to have a great audience base. And so the way that you invest their budget to support that goal is entirely different, right? And there's multiple channels. So if a firm were to come to us today and say, hey, I really want to increase my pipeline of warm leads, what does something like that look like for you?
Sure. And that's the kind of specific direction that we look for to double click into strategy, right? So the keyword is warm leads. So we have a couple of different paid channels that are tried and true that typically make up a paid media plan. And our favorite is Google search, very popular. This is when someone is showing high intent, typing an actual search query into any search engine, whether it's Google or Bing. And ultimately, we're able to target specific keywords and search queries to get in front of a prospect that could be looking for a related service, and just meeting them where they are in that journey. So Google search is a popular strategy that we like to recommend. There are lots of considerations there. And the cost per click in this channel can come at a premium, very different from some of our other channels like social, LinkedIn, Facebook. But we're paying for that premium cost per click, and we do tend to see a higher intent in that channel.
Mm-hmm. So when you think of firms that aren't able to sort of distill down what that goal is, they've got a pipeline, let's say, but they're not clear on what's the breakdown maybe that a firm should have between awareness, lead gen to sort of keep that funnel healthy. What are some of the things that you recommend for a firm that's fairly well established and wants to dabble in sort of paid advertising, but they don't know where to start?
Sure. I would recommend starting from the beginning with a brief. Typically, that's what we like to have to make sure all folks are on the same page in terms of goals, budget, target audiences, ideal outcomes. So, and a lot of these things may assume to be obvious, but once you put them in writing and you start thinking about these questions, you may find that you're uncovering business questions that maybe you haven't thought of. And this is what starts the strategic conversation of planning is, well, we were hoping to generate 50 qualified leads this month. However, maybe there are other aspects such as brand awareness that need to come into play in order to support that as well. So we like to definitely encourage the use of foundational media planning tools like briefs to start.
When you think about, like, if you were just to do some quick hit answers for us, what's the range of media investment that you're seeing firms make today? Let's say a fintech firm that's fairly well established. How much money should they be putting into advertising?
Sure. So we tend to break down planning in monthly and quarterly plans, right? So if we're looking at any given month, we tend to reverse engineer a recommended budget by what we see the industry cost per leads and cost per engagements net out to. So for fintech, we see a bit of a higher cost per lead. Mm-hmm. They can range anywhere between $300 to $800 when it comes to a qualified lead. And of course, we're always aiming for qualified versus quantity, because the quantity part can be a bit easier sometimes, but important to emphasize the quality and find that balance as well. So a little bit more expensive on the fintech side.
I find that, but then also at the same time, when we take on clients who have had other approaches to media strategy, and they see things like, okay, their cost per lead is significantly less, right? But then when you get into sort of the back end engine and you see what's going on, it's driving a lot of leads that are not even potentially from the United States, right?
Sure. And that's why we always emphasize data hygiene. And we do like to start there with measurement and defining success. So when we talk about a qualified lead, what is the specific logic and criteria that we're talking about here? That's very important in the beginning stages, because we can't measure success if we don't define it from day one, right?
I am so with you on that. Is there anything else that you would say, for an RIA, because we talked a bit about fintech, you think about, this is a pretty saturated industry with RIAs and wealth managers. When they go to dabble in sort of the paid media, I think there's more price sensitivity and concern, of course, like what's the ROI on this investment and the amount of time that it might take to see those results. So if you were to work with a firm that's never put their toe in the water and they're thinking about paid media, what would that look like for an RIA maybe today?
I think it looks like starting with very realistic expectations. For an RIA that may not be as established, the geographical component for an RIA, it plays a much larger role, because ideally, a customer will be in close contact, right? They'll be within a 25 to 50 mile radius. So geography plays a larger role. Are you an RIA that targets New York City metro area, or are you an RIA that targets a less populated area? So this is a variable that plays an important role. And then I think for success for an RIA account, you need to start small and scale strategically to manage those realistic expectations up front. Because an analogy that I like, and one of our colleagues here at Intentionally likes to use, is that paid media, I used the analogy earlier of a faucet that you can turn on and off, and we like that control. But when we think about algorithms and where we are today with paid media, we can also look at the analogy of a paid media campaign being a bit of a cruise ship. So you put all this work and time into launching a campaign, and it's often running and cruising. And you need to let it get to full speed. It needs time to ramp up and learn, educate itself, and really hit its full stride. So patience is also a virtue. We won't always see immediate lead generation results, but we will see immediate brand awareness, impressions, and clicks. So realistic expectations is important.
Yes, I love that. I love that you always have the inside sort of information and you're looking at a dashboard. And of course, from an intentionally standpoint, it's something that we monitor every day. I think the difference with some of these firms is, when they DIY approach some of this, because that's what they're doing and that makes sense for them, for their business model. But at the end of the day, also sort of that patience and like, how do you know when to pull the trigger on, oh, this is clearly not meeting expectations versus I have to give it 2 more months of runtime.
Sure.
And I think that's a decision that can only be made, I think, by somebody who's been doing it for a long time, like you and the team. But I encourage everybody who's listening to this is thinking about paid media to have those conversations, think about those goals, right? Build that strategy. And if it's something that's a little bit overwhelming, there's always partners that can do it, of course, us. But I always would say somebody in the wealth management industry who knows this space intimately well, because it is very nuanced, right?
Yes. And it's important to not be hesitant to ask questions. Having that general understanding of your ad campaign that you are launching is so important, because you can have a more in-depth conversation about the results. And of course, we always have real-time data available that we can reference offhand. But if there are certain aspects of your campaign that you don't fully understand, we always encourage that you ask any and all questions, because we're in this together. It is a collaborative approach. We're never setting and forgetting it. And it's a continued conversation. So just having that foundational understanding of your campaign is important.
Absolutely. All right, Jaimie, I'm going to let you go. It's been awesome chatting with you, and we'll check back in later.
Yes. Thanks, Jess.
Yeah, thanks. That's the end of Intentionally's Real Marketing Talk for today. We'll talk to you guys later.